Hey guys, for math today, we are going to start working with dividing with fractions, but before that we need to kind of go back and review dividing just regular whole numbers so we have a really good idea when we get into dividing with fractions because it can be kind of tricky. So we're going to start with talking about sharing versus grouping. There's two different types of division, one where we share, one where we group. We're going to talk about what that's like today using our practice problem, 15 divided by 3. So we all know that 15 divided by 3 is equal to 5, but we can represent that a couple different ways. One way we can do that is by sharing. So when I go to my pattern blocks, I have 15 pattern blocks here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to split them into 3 groups. I'm going to divide it by 3. So I'm going to pull a couple over here. Oops. And a couple more over here. That's 5. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here you can see I have 1, 2, 3 groups. So when we're talking about sharing, we're talking about how many groups or how many people you're sharing with. That's where the sharing comes from. So with this problem right here, 15 is the number of items that I have, and 3 is the number of people I'm sharing with. Okay, so that sharing is when the number I'm dividing by is the number of people that I'm sharing with. Now, the opposite of that is grouping. So I'm going to go back here, clear my drawing, and instead of splitting into 3 groups, I'm going to figure out how many groups I can make if I do groups of 3, just like this. So I'm going to make my groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So here you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. And that's where the term grouping comes from, is how many groups you can make. Now, that's not to be confused with how many groups you have, but it's how many groups you can make. So focus here on the number of people that you're sharing with. For example, here you're sharing with 3 people. With grouping, you're thinking how many groups I can make of that number. So we're talking about how many groups you can make of 3. So 15 is still the number of items I had, and 3 was the number in each group. Okay? So, oops, excuse my handwriting. So sorry, guys. So with sharing, 5 represents the number in each group. And with grouping, it represents the number of groups that you have, or the number of people you're sharing with, okay? Sorry, that got a little messy. But those are the 2 basic differences. So with sharing, just to go over it one last time, let's use another equation. So let's use 20 divided by 4 equals blank. So let's pretend we don't know. 20 divided by 4. If I were sharing, 20 represents the number of items that I have, and 4 represents the number of people that I'm sharing with. And then my answer, whatever my answer is, would be the number of items in each group. And then on the opposite, with grouping, 20 still represents the number of items that I have, but now 4 represents the number of items in each group. And then my answer is the number of groups that I would be able to make. So that's kind of a basic breakdown. It's a little bit cleaner on this page of sharing versus grouping. Now, I'm going to pull up, oops. this picture. And we're going to kind of break down together just one more time what each number represents in each of these problems. You can see that the problem is the same on each slide, but the picture, the representation of it is different for each one. So let's go ahead and, let's go ahead and look at this a little bit more closely. So for sharing, remember that means that this number represents the number of people that I'm sharing with. So I know that 3 is the number of people I'm sharing with. 15 is the number of items. Same kind of thing we just went over. Number of, and then 5 is equal to how many are in each group, or how many each person would get. Okay, so again, that is sharing, where the number represents the number of people I'm sharing with, okay? Grouping, I'm going to focus on that 3 again, but 3 is going to tell me how many are in each group or how many each person gets. Again, 15 is my total number of items. But now 5, instead of representing how many are in each group, 5 now represents the number of groups or the number of people I can share with. Okay, so now when we are given just the equation, 15 divided by 3, it doesn't really matter which one of these you choose to use to solve, because you'll still get the correct answer 5 if we're just solving the equation. But if we're drawing pictures to represent, or we're given a word problem, that will help us figure out what kind of picture we need to draw and how to represent it. So, for example, if I were to write a word problem for 15 divided by 3 as sharing, I might say that Jeff made 15 cookies and divided them equally among his 3 cousins. How many cookies does each cousin get? That's where I'm telling you the number of items, 15 cookies, and 3 cousins, 3 people, or 3 groups that I'm splitting those up into, okay? So that's an example of sharing, and you can tell me that each cousin would get 5 cookies. An example of grouping would be that Jeff made 15 cookies and packed them into sacks of 3. How many sacks of cookies was he able to make? So again, the 15 is the total number of cookies. But now, instead of having 3 cousins, Jeff is making packs of cookies, and he's putting 3 cookies in each pack. So he's wondering, how many packs can I make? And that's where 5 would represent the number and say he can make 15 packs of cookies. So that's a brief explanation on the difference between sharing and grouping. For your assignment today, in your student book on page 190 and 191, you have 2 pages that you'll be completing. Make sure you read the instructions very carefully. I will include both pages on this assignment as well. So if you don't have your student book for whatever reason, you can still get to those pages. Just make sure that you read the instructions really carefully and pay very close attention to what you're doing. Rewatch this video if you need a refresher on it, or check online, see if you can find other examples of sharing versus grouping. If you're still confused, not sure what to do, please let me know before you start to complete the assignment. If you're not sure what to do and you start working on the assignment, it's very likely that you'll get a couple of the answers wrong and I'll have to ask you to redo it, but you might not know what to do because we didn't check and see, or check and ask for help when we needed it. So please make sure that you let me know if you're confused or don't understand before you start working on the assignment. And that is your math work for today. Good luck.